I'll go first, then Senator Heinrich, and so on and so forth in order of seniority and arrival at the hearing. I want to start by talking briefly about the Antiquities Act. This is a law passed over a century ago by Congress. It gives the president power unilaterally to declare national monuments. Now, there's a restriction in it that requires national monuments occupy no more land that is compatible, the smallest area compatible with the interest to be protected by the monument. These have become something of a political football in parts of the country, especially in my state. In Utah, President Clinton designated the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in 1996. President Obama added the Bears Ears National Monument in 2016, shortly before he left office. Now, both of these objections were made, both these designations were made over the objection of the people of Utah and their elected representatives. And President Trump later reduced the size of both monuments in 2017 after he got elected to bring them more into conformity with the Antiquities Act's requirement for minimal boundaries. Then in 2021, President Biden re-expanded them, exceeding the scope of the law and disregarding local input. As I explained to President Biden at the time, this is the size of 2 Delawares within my state that have been moved into this very restricted use classification. The point is not that there aren't beautiful things to protect in the state, but the line was drawn so big and the monument was made so expansive, in part because local leaders weren't consulted, and to the extent that they were heard, their counsel was ignored. So, Governor Burgum, I'd like to invite you to when you visit Utah, to meet with those whose voices were ignored by the Biden administration during those monument re-expansions. Will you work with me to try to fix that current mess and try to figure out how best to proceed and to make sure that the Antiquities Act designated monuments don't exceed the restriction within the statute itself?
Well, thank you, Senator Lee, for that important question. The 1905 Antiquities Act, of course, was signed into law by President Roosevelt himself, and it was, as you stated multiple times, it states very clearly that it's the smallest possible area to protect those objects to be protected, and its original intention was really to protect, as it says, antiquities, areas like, I would say, Indiana Jones-type archaeological protections. These are essential that we protect these areas as a country, and that's what the law was intended. But I would look forward to working with you, and particularly in the area of local consultation, because when the federal government overreaches into a state like yours that's already has over 60% of its land in public lands and restricts that use, it's got tremendous impact on tribes, on the local communities and all those around, and I just think it's important that we strike the right balance. I look forward to working with you on this issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Housing is another area that I'd like to address briefly. There's a particularly acute housing shortage in the West where the presence of federal land, not just the presence, but the predominance of federal land available for housing frequently results in shortages. It just makes a lot of things difficult. And it's not as though we have one part of the state that is all federal and another part of the state that is all non-federal. It's all intermingled. And as a result, it impacts all kinds of things. Now, many of our communities in states like Utah and Nevada, among others, find ourselves feeling sort of like we're islands, floating islands within a sea of federal land. And that just constrains growth and makes our constraints on our housing supply that much more dire. I would love to work with you on a bill that I've introduced that I've worked on for several years called the Houses Act. And in addition to looking for and developing other creative ways to address the housing affordability crisis in the West, in your view, how can the Department of the Interior help address the housing crisis in areas like, as is the case in my state, where the presence of federal land often inhibits community needs?
Well, understand that one of the great challenges we're facing in this nation right now is housing affordability. And in my discussion and friendship with Governor Spencer Cox of your state, know that it's a high priority for him and for the state. I think there are opportunities for us to accomplish both. I mean, like I said, we're in a time of abundance. When we've got federal lands abutting urban areas, and we maybe have other areas that maybe need to be protected, like we've done in North Dakota as governor. Sometimes we've done land swaps, so we trade state land for private lands to provide better outcomes for both of those pieces of land, and I think there certainly are opportunities here. Public lands in general, some like the national parks, absolutely, we need to support and protect every single inch of those. But in other cases, we've got a multiple use scenario for our lands, and I believe there's pathways we can find, particularly in states like yourselves and others that have 50, 60% or more of your land held by the federal government, that we can find appropriate solutions to help address the housing. Look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you, Governor. I see my time's expired. We'll turn the time over to Senator Heinrich.